In this first chapter, I'll be going over the face modeling of our Ninja and some fundamental techniques for mesh modeling in Blender. I'll begin with a default Blender scene, and I want to open the image editor right now. Whoops, wrong window. I'll open it in the corner window. And I'll go to Image in the menu and Open, and navigate to the directory with my concept image and load that. I'll then pan up so I can see the face, and then Image Open again, and one by one I'll load in my reference plates, front and profile. I'll switch back to the concept image there. I can get rid of the toolbar with T, and if I drag the corner of the 3D view, I can split into two windows and change the front and side. I'm going to select all with A and delete with X. And then by hitting N and opening the properties, I'll turn on background image and just select my reference plates from the menu. So there's our reference plates, but there is a possibility that they won't match up, and I can check this by using Shift A and in the Add menu, adding a plane, scaling with S, and oops, I need to be in front view. Using numpad 1, I can just drag the plane up to line up with the pupil of the eye. And you can see here that they don't match in the front and side. So I need to make some more reference points. I'll duplicate with Shift D and just place one in front view right at the bottom of the nose, and duplicate one more time and place one just at the corner of the mouth. And this is in front view. But then in my profile view, I can come back into the properties with N, and down in the background image options, I'll play around with the size slider and also the X and Y parameters. And this will allow me to maneuver the reference plate to match up with those lines. So the top line, I want to place the pupil right where that is, and make sure that the corner of the mouth and bottom of the nose reference points are also in line. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now in my front view, if I bring up the properties again, I'm going to go down to those same options and just move my front reference plate on the X-axis until the center of his face lines up as best as I can make it with the middle of the grid line. Now mind you, I'm modeling the top of his face, so since his head's a little bit tilted, I'm just lining up between his eyes and not really worrying about his mouth. But that looks pretty good. So all that's left is I'm going to select all with A and move my reference points to layer 20 in this case, that I usually use for trash items. So my front end profile, I'll zoom in on the eye and left click to place my 3D cursor right at the pupil. I'll then Shift A and add a circle. But before I begin any modeling, I'm going to open the toolbar, and down the very bottom of it, there's an option here to change the vertices, and I'm going to change that to 10. Now I'm going to rotate with R and hold Control so I can rotate snap 90 degrees. And then we've got the circle facing us in front view. It's a bit hard to see my mesh at the moment, so I'm going to open up the properties, and underneath the size slider is the transparency, and I can just increase that so I can see my mesh a bit better. So now I'm going to just hit Tab to go into edit mode, select all and scale down I can also scale again, move in any direction and hit the middle mouse button, and that will lock to the axis of the direction I was going. I'll begin grabbing the two vertices on each side of my circle and just placing them around the corner of the eye. I'll then grab the rest of the vertices and match them as best as I can, evenly spaced as possible, to form the outline of the eyes. This is only being done in front reference at the moment, so once I've got a pretty good trace on the front, I can then go into the profile, and by selecting in a vertical manner, I can move the vertices and match them up using the reference plate in the profile view. I'm pretty happy with that trace now, so I'm going to select all and hit E to extrude, and then just scale up and also scale a bit on the Z-axis. After which I'll just begin tweaking the second loop of vertices. The top row is going to go a little bit up into what will be the top eyelid. So I'm just pushing those up a little bit higher. And also keeping an eye on my profile reference. I can select multiple vertices by holding Shift and right-click selecting. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think we can move on to modeling more of the face. I'm going to Alt right click to select that whole inner loop, and then I'm going to extrude in and just scale a little bit. And in my profile view, I'm just going to move it a little bit inside the eye. I'll then do the same with the outside loop and just begin pulling out those vertices that will branch out further to create the face. And as with scaling on axis, you can hit G and then middle mouse button to translate on an axis as well. I'm doing that to make sure that when I move vertices in my profile view, it won't destroy any of the placing that I've done in the front view. So at the very top of my outside loop there, you can see I'm pushing it forward again as the eyebrow starts to come outward. And the next loop in tucks back, and that will become the eyelid. I'm just trying some global tweaks here, but they're not really working, so I'm going to undo that with Ctrl Z. So that's looking pretty good now. I've matched to the front and side reference, and I've got something that loosely resembles a blocky eye at this point. So if I bring back my layer 20, I can actually select the top reference plane here, and by hitting Shift S, I can select Cursor to Selected. And you can see that my 3D cursor snaps to the object center, that orange dot. So if I get rid of layer 20 again, I can select the eye mesh by hitting space and typing center in the search menu. I can select Set Center and then Center Cursor. And you can see now the orange dot, which is the object center, is right in the middle of the grid. At this point I'm going to go to my modifier options and add a modifier which will be subdivision surface. I'll add one more modifier, which is of course the mirror modifier. Awesome, we've now got a mirrored mesh, but even though I've used the subdivision modifier, it's still a little bit blocky. So if I go into the toolbar here, I can select smooth under the shading panel, smooth out those edges. And now under the subsurf options, I'm going to turn on show subsurf in edit mode, which is those 3 triangle looking vertices, and also hit optimal display. And you can see the effect it has on the mesh here. The edges and vertices will stick to the subdivision surface. Now if I hit Ctrl R, I can make a loop cut here in the corner of the eye. I can then hit Ctrl E, select Edge Slide from the menu, and that allows me to tweak my edge loop between the other 2. And I can check any tweaks that I've made just by zooming out and having a look at the mirrored mesh. I'm pretty happy with the eye now, so I'd like to move on to the bridge and the nose. While in edit mode, I'm just going to hit Shift A and add a plane. And then just rotate that plane 90 degrees again, so that it's facing the front view. Scale down. Now back in the mirror modifier options, I'm going to turn on the checkbox Do Clipping. And that allows any vertices that pass the mirror point in the middle to get stuck. I'm also going to press that little up arrow in the mirror modifier options, and that will then allow the subsurf to work well with the mirror modifier. And also by selecting this 3 vertice triangle, I can turn off subsurf in edit mode, and you can see the cage around the subsurf mesh. When you're in this mode, you can see where the vertices really are, rather than their virtual placement being stuck on the subsurf mesh. So I've just made one extrusion below and above my original plane, and by selecting this one vertice, I can begin to hit E and extrude, and just in my front view in 2D, trace all the way around to form my eyebrow and underneath the eye. I want to split this edge here, and I can do that by hitting W to open the specials menu and selecting subdivide, and that would give me one extra vertice to work with. And by using Ctrl Tab to switch between vertice and edge selection mode, I can just join those faces. And I've just made a cut above the inside corner of the eye. I'm also just going to subdivide this edge here. Now that everything is connected properly, I'll go into my profile view and just begin pushing and pulling everything back so that it matches in the 3D environment. I can use some landmarks here, like the edge of the eyebrow in both the front and side reference can be a good indicator of where a vertice can go. It gives an idea of depth. And this top row here, I'm just following the eyebrows, switching in and out of subsurf and edit mode as I go. And I'm starting to see the shape really come along now. Just tweaking the nose and pushing some of these bottom vertices out, as the cheek does come out quite a bit there. So with those vertices matched in 3D, I just need to join together the bridge of the nose to the edge of the eye. If I make a cut at the top here, I can move that vertice up and make another quad to avoid having any triangles. And finally, just at the bottom here, I'll move these 2 vertices up and join the face. In the concept art, you can see that the face does come down a little bit lower, so I'm going to make an extrusion from the bottom row of vertices here. And that will cover the cheek area mainly. And I'm not using an excessive amount of vertices or loop cuts, just enough that I can get the general definition. So at this point I'd like to connect the tip of that nose to the cheek. So by pressing F between those two vertices and then subdividing, I can then pull that vertice downward and form another quad. I'm pretty happy with that. It looks like I've taken the face low enough that it will be hidden behind the mask now. But still remaining is the top and side of the face. So let's work on that now. I'm going to select some of the vertices on the side and extrude those outward and scale them just to spread them out a bit. And manually tweak them to about the hairline. That seems to be a fairly good landmark. And from there I can also match up the front and side reference, looking at where the hair is meeting the temple. Here I'm just using smooth in the specials menu. It can really help to flesh out an organic area, smooth it out, stop there from being too many glitches. I mean, in organic modeling there really isn't any place that you're going to find a hard surface, so smooth can be a really good tool. I've just made a loop cut here, and this will allow me to flesh out the eyeball sticking to the eyelids. And you can see there I'm using Alt-S to scale along the normal, and this is a very helpful way to just puff something out, be it a vertice or an edge. Being very subtle here as I play around with the corner of the eye. Small movements can have quite a big impact, so I'm just tweaking and through trial and error finding something that looks quite nice there. I'm making sure especially to do things like looking at my own eye in the mirror. I've got a small mirror that's next to my desk, and I highly recommend getting one or stealing one from someone in the house. That's dictating a lot of how I move these vertices around to try and match what I'm seeing in either reference images or my own reflection. I'm just going to pull the eyelid a little bit lower by moving those vertices down. I'm pretty happy with everything there, so now I might work on the inside corner of the eye. I grab these two vertices and just move them closer to the corner. I can grab these two here and lower them down. And that just helps to get a bit more definition on the shape. Now I can alt-right click and select this edge loop here. And then I can also box select with B just to get my selection ready to move these vertices up, which will become the forehead. Now I'm doing my best to spread the vertices outward, but there's quite a lot of vertices there and I don't want to stretch them too much. Just box selecting all of those vertices and moving them back a bit, and just smoothing out once. So I'm going to connect these faces now. And from this point, it's really just trying to smooth the shape out as best I can. Just getting the bridge of the eyebrow looking right. And now I'm just once again looking at my own eye in the mirror and deciding maybe I need to get that bottom eyelid a little bit lower and a little bit more defined. Also giving the bridge of the nose here some attention. And something worth mentioning is, at the mirror point, be sure to keep that nice and smooth. If the direction change is too sharp at the middle there, you'll really notice a line right down the middle of the nose. So I'm just going to make another loop cut here with Ctrl R. And that will go just underneath the eyebrow and allow me to add a bit more definition there, allow me to flesh the eyebrow out a lot more. And another cut here that will allow me to define the forehead and side of the head a bit more. Once I've made a cut or cuts, then comes the task of just tweaking the vertices to get rid of their computerized look, make sure there aren't too many straight lines, and also make sure that it's following the flow of my mesh properly, following the eyebrow or the eye or whatever part of the face that I'm trying to achieve definition on. So I'm only going to be modeling what's seen, and it looks like this is the only part of his face that will be not covered by cloth and mask. So at this point, I've basically done all the modeling. I might just do some tweaking, and by coming down and pressing O to go into proportional editing, I can turn that on, and by using the middle mouse wheel to scroll, I can define the radius of effect. And using proportional editing can just allow you to move big chunks of the mesh at any one time. It's very good for editing larger areas of the mesh. For example, I think that his eyes should be a little bit bigger and a bit more stylized. So in this case, I've just Alt-right click selected one of the loops and just hold Shift and repeat that to select two of them. Then I can scale and also rotate with R and choose a axis to rotate on. You can hit R and then hit Z, Y, X, and it will rotate on that axis. I feel like the vertices are getting a little bit clumped there, so by using Ctrl E again, I'm going to edge slide just these two vertices between the cheek and the nose and move them down a bit. The closer vertices get clumped together, the more definition will be there whether you want it or not. So sometimes smoothing out vertices and their distances can make a shape much smoother. So with the modeling done, I can hit N, open my properties, and uncheck background image. I'm then going to add a UV sphere in the mesh add menu. I'll scale it down and just place it near the eye socket, and this will be the beginning of our eye. Now I can just use the front and side reference again to, as best as I can, match up the eyeball. Try and assume where it would really be. I'm pretty happy with the profile position, so now just by translating along the x-axis, I can match it up in the front there. So the eyeball's in position, but you can notice that it's peeking through the eyelids a bit. And if I turn on proportional editing, you can see it moves the whole eye. I can come down and change it over here from on to connected. And that will only move this top part of the eyelid. So I can move the vertices of the eyelids and give the appearance that they're pressed up against the eyeball. Also, if we're ever to light this ninja, we don't want too many gaps because the light can quite easily filter through and can look quite unnatural. So now moving on to the bottom eyelid, just sticking it to the eyeball. And that can always help giving the eyelids a bit more of a natural shape by having a real sphere there that you can reference to. And that looks pretty good. So now all that's left is to concentrate on the eyeball, and by hitting the slash key on numpad, I can bring the eye into a local view. And just in the toolbar I'm going to smooth, and then rotate the sphere so that the tip where all of the loops meet is right at the center of the pupil. From there I'm going to go into edit mode and select all vertices and duplicate, as you can see there, and then just scale very slightly. You can even hold shift to scale at a lesser degree. A little bit bigger than the original sphere, and then hide it with H. From there I'm going to select the very middle vertice and just Alt right click while holding shift some more of the loops that spawn out from the center. I probably did a few too many there, so let's try that again. Using my background plate as a reference, I can make a guess as to how big I want the iris based on how many loops I select. That's probably one too many, so I might just deselect that one. You can always just scale the vertices that are selected just for any smaller adjustments. That size feels pretty good. So now I'll go into side view and just scale along the y-axis. And then with those vertices completely flattened, I can just move and rotate them so that they line up nicely with the next loop. I'm then going to hit Alt-H to bring back the sphere that we created earlier. And this will become our cornea. Now the cornea does pop out a little bit more, so I'm going to turn on proportional editing and turn it on to connected mode. And then I'm just going to select this one tip vertice of the sphere. And then come back down and change from smooth fall off to root fall off, which is basically the opposite effect. And using the scroll wheel, I can change the fall off just to the right amount that I like. And with G I can push out the cornea tip to create a nice dome effect. This setup will really come in handy in the materials and lighting area, as you can get a nice refracting cornea there. So I'm going to hit numpad slash to go back to global view, and I'm just going to have to make adjustments because of the cornea now. Let's change the shape of the eyeball a bit. If I hit R and then R again while selecting the eyeball, I can rotate it freely and get it to point a bit more naturally. And I'm just going to move the eyeball a little bit further back into the socket since we made that cornea. And then I'll just add a mirror modifier. And it does seem like nothing has happened, but that's because the object center is in the middle of the sphere. So if I select the face and Shift S, object center to cursor, and then press spacebar, type in center again, select set center and center cursor, bam, there we go. But you can see that the mirroring is a little bit off, and that was mainly from rotating the object before. So if I turn on the axis, you can see the problem. Luckily there's a fix for this. If I press spacebar again and type in rotation, you can see down there apply rotation. And if I select that, it will reset the object's rotation, and mirroring will work quite well with the global axes. And there we have it. Our face mesh And in our eyeball, we have the cornea and the iris mesh underneath. So we've just completed the face of our ninja character, and also the eyes, which are very important for later on. Because a lot of his face is covered, any facial animation that will be done will really be shown through his eyebrows and eyes. So it was good that we paid attention to the topology around the face, and also eyes that will render out really nicely later on. So with that done, we can move on to the next chapter, the mask.